Hey, it is the one and only Mr. R-Man here again with the Amazing Spider-Man and the history about it. And I caught that I said that this Amazing Fantasy Spider-Man is not the first one, but it is, and I wanted to make that clear to everyone, just in case you got a little confused. Yeah, the main characters: Spider-Man, May, Aunt, Aunt May Parker, Uncle Ben, the burglar. So there's a burglar in this. Main suspect, Sally, Flash, Crusher, Hogan. Main location. I should go over the story and everything, because that kind of filled in. But where we left off was I was talking about the costumes. But I think I gotta give you a little thing. I think I gotta talk about this too. So, I will be reading it as usual. So background, we got a little nerdy Parker there, but he becomes the greatest man in the world. Francis, with the prospect of cancellation, the publisher of Amazing Fantasy, a comic packed with alien and monster stories, had nothing to lose when he agreed to let Stan Lee and Steve Ditko introduce a new and unconventional superhero. Well, that's just background. I need to give you the story. Alright, so whenever I run into stuff like this, I will be giving you the story. Okay, story. When bitten by a radioactive spider at a science exhibit, bookworm Peter Parker is transformed into the mysterious teen powerhouse sensation known as Amazing Spider-Man. His classmates called him a professional wallflower. The girl rejected him, and the boys ridiculed and berated him every chance they got. But little did the students of Midtown High realize that soon enough they'd be calling Peter Parker amazing. But Peter's life wasn't all bad. Back in his modest Forest Hills home, Peter Parker had a support system of his elderly Uncle Ben and Aunt May. 1. The kindness meant the world to him, and with their guidance, he often buried himself in his schoolwork, trying his best to ignore the cruel taunts of his high school peers. On one such day, Peter was escaping his troubles at a science exhibit in New York City on radiology. Unbeknownst to the teen, a spider dangling into an active experiment got doused by radioactive rays and then bit Peter Parker in his hand. Feeling strange, Peter left the exhibit and wandered into the street, not noticing a car careering toward him. As it by instinct, the young man suddenly leaped out of the way and managed to adhere to the side of the neighboring building. After he accidentally crushed a steel pipe in his hand as if it were paper, Peter realized that the dying spider must have gifted him with an amazing new set of abilities. This was the opportunity he'd waited for his entire life for. He quickly began to take advantage of the new powers, entering himself into an open call wrestling match against a hulking brute called Crusher Hogan. Not wanting to reveal his identity, to the general public, Peter donned a cheap mask as a disguise and then easily defeated the wrestler in true showboat fashion. The match led led to a cash prize, which led to Peter nabbing the publicity agent, which in turn led to the next big chapter of his life. Peter crafted a bright costume and used his scientific knowledge to construct wrist shooters to a revolutionary web-like adhesive. He dubbed himself Spider-Man, and it wasn't long before he was staring in his own TV social, happily strolling backstage after the first day's filming. Peter ignored the cries for help from a nearby policeman and allowed a fleeing burglar to run past him unimpeded. It was a small incident, and Peter Parker assumed that it wasn't his problem. Indeed, Peter continued his career as Spider-Man, becoming a TV star and a national sensation. However, one night when Peter Parker returned home from a personal appearance as Spider-Man, he was startled to find a police car parked in front of his house. The young man soon discovered his beloved Uncle Ben had been murdered, and that the culprit was held up to the Acme warehouse in the waterfront. In a fit of rage, Peter donned his Spider-Man costume and swung across town to a dilapidated where powerless the killer had plenty of places to hide, and he would be able to pick them off one by one if they charged, realizing it was only a matter of time before darkness fell. Spider-Man straying into action. He quickly used his powers to capture the beat of criminal, only to discover that the man was the same burglar he had let escape from the TV studio just a few days earlier. After webbing up the criminal for the police to find, Peter Parker walked slowly into the moonlight, overwhelmed with grief and guilt, and learning the most important lesson of his life: with great power, there must also come great responsibility. And on top of that, we talked about that in part 1. Now we shall be going to Suit Up in part 3. Thank you for watching. Mr. R-Man out.